Hello, and welcome to the IOLITE Python for LA-ICP-MS course. My name is Bence Paul, and I'll be teaching this course with IOLITE's lead developer, Joe Petrus. First of all, I wanted to say welcome. We've had a great response to this course. Roughly 4 times the number of people have signed up than we thought would, which I'm sure we can handle, but I think it really highlights that there's a need in the community for people to be able to create their own tools, and that we're not quite at that stage yet where you can do that without having some knowledge of how to code. So this is hopefully the first step for a lot of people in being able to create the tools that they want.
Just before we look at the course overview, I wanted to say a few words about learning a coding or programming language. The first is that it is a lot like learning a spoken language. You have to start with some very basics. Just like with a human language, you need to start with some sort of alphabet. In this case, this is the building blocks of the language, and that's what we'll be looking at in the first couple of weeks of this course. You also need to learn from others, and that's really important. It's really important that you read other people's code, that you take in examples from as many different sources as you can find. It's also very important that you put into practice what you've learnt. So you need to write your own code to actually help you learn. To that end, we'll have you reading other people's code in the course, and we'll also have you doing assignments each week. These will help you put into practice what you've learnt and help solidify the concepts. I also wanted to point out that even though we're learning Python in this course, a lot of the concepts that you learn are transferable to other coding languages. Things like for loops and conditionals, they are present in all of the coding languages, usually just in a slightly different format. So what you learn in this course will be transferable to other languages. And finally, I wanted to talk about mastery. It's unlikely that in an 8-week course you'll become a master of Python. However, you should still be able to become quite productive. I wouldn't consider myself a master even though I've been coding in Python for a long time. However, I am still able to be quite productive, and hopefully you will be too by the end of this course. Now let's have a quick look at the course overview. In weeks 1 and 2, we'll be covering the absolute basics. Things like variables, conditional statements, loops, that type of thing. If you are familiar with Python, then you could probably just skim this material just to make sure that you're aware of all of it and not actually have much to do in these 2 weeks. However, if you can, we'd really appreciate it if you could help out on the forum for those people who are still learning this and may have some questions. If you feel confident in the material they're asking about, feel free to help them out. In week 3, this will be where we first introduce the IOLITE Python API. There is quite a bit of a steep learning curve for this week. It's unfortunate that's just the way it will have to be, but we will be introducing how to access the objects within IOLITE and also giving you a taste of some of the libraries we use, such as NumPy and Pandas. We'll also be looking at some of the simpler modules, such as importers and exporters. In week 4, we'll be looking at QA/QC modules and how to write your own. In week 5, which actually starts in the new year, we'll be looking at how to write your own data reduction scheme. In week 6, we'll be looking at image inspectors. These are the panels that appear on the right hand side of the IOLITE imaging interface, things like the rare earth plot or the histogram, those type of things, and looking at how you can write your own imaging inspector. In week 7, we'll be looking at database interaction and how to do things like calculate results based on the pool of data that you have in your database. You can also use this database interaction to create things like dashboards based on your long-term results. And finally, in week 8, we'll be looking at how to create a user interface plugin. This is probably one of the hardest things you can do using the API, which is why we've left it to the week when you will have had a chance to practice some of the more basic concepts. So let's write our first line of code. In programming, there is a tradition that your first project is this Hello World project, which just simply prints the words Hello World. Let's see how to do that in IOLITE. If you open a new experiment in IOLITE, you'll be able to show the IOLITE Python console by going to Tools and selecting Python console. Note that there is a keyboard shortcut for showing and hiding this. This will open this panel at the bottom of the screen. To print out our hello world statement, we can just type in print, all lowercase, open brackets, quote, hello world, close quotes and close bracket, and press enter, and it will print out hello world. And that's your first Python program. It's quite a simple one, but it proves that you can do this within IOLITE. It's important to note that IOLITE has its own version of Python that it runs completely independent from any other versions of Python that you may have on your system. We also have the IOLITE Python workspace. This is where you can write, load, save, and run Python scripts. What is a Python script? It's simply a text file containing lines that you would normally type into the Python console. The reason we put them in scripts is so that you don't have to type everything out again. It's much easier to reuse the code. Also, typing things out into the console is slow and there's a chance that you will make errors. So we put them all together into a script to make the code reusable. So you can see that within IOLITE there are two ways that you can interact with Python directly. You can do it via the console, which is mostly for one-liners, or via the Python workspace, where you can write scripts. As we'll see later on, you can also write Python scripts that IOLITE will read and store them in certain folders. These are the paths that are set in IOLITE's preferences. But we'll come back to that more once we start writing modules for IOLITE. You may also want to install Python separate to IOLITE. And depending on what system you're using, you may already have Python installed. For example, Macs come with Python installed by default. One way to check this is to open a terminal window and type the following: Python space -- version. This will print out what version is installed if Python is on your system. On Windows, you might also want to try Python 3 space -- version, because on Windows sometimes Python is referred to as Python 3 in the terminal. If it comes back with a version number, it means that it's installed. If it comes back with an error, it means that it's not installed. What's the difference between Python 2 and Python 3? Well, it's a little hard to explain, but basically if you're just starting out with Python, just stick with version 3. The two are not completely interoperable, they're not exactly the same and interchangeable, and so I recommend sticking with version 3, and that's what we'll be using in this course. The official repository of all things Python is python.org, and this is run by the foundation that makes Python available. It does have installers there that you can use to install Python on your system. This will install a very basic version of Python that's very widely used. However, I found that some of the installers were a little bit hard to use. Another option is to use Anaconda. Anaconda is specifically set up for data science. It also comes with a few tools that you might find useful for writing code, and when you get a little bit further along and more advanced, there'll be some extra tools in there that you'll find handy. You might also want to get yourself a good text editor. I recommend Atom because it is both. It is available for both Mac and Windows. Also on Windows, another solid package is Notepad++. Both of those are free. And also, I just wanted to point out that in the early stages of the textbook, there's a couple of commands that, for slightly complicated reasons to explain, may not work if you're using IOLITE's Python console. The main one is just the input command, and you can get around it by using a separate version of Python for these first couple of weeks. So let's talk about safety. The most important thing is that you should never run code that you don't fully understand. And to fully understand it, you need to have read through it thoroughly. This is because if you don't understand it, it could do something to your computer, and we can't guarantee that everyone in the course is acting in your best interest. So if you have any doubt, don't run the code. Also, get into the habit of not double-clicking files. You should always open the files with a text editor first so you can see what's in them. If it is a Python file, as you think it is, it will be human readable. You should be able to read what's inside it. If it comes out as a bunch of symbols, it could either mean that it's a binary file or that it's an executable file. And executable files could be things like viruses, etc. If you open it with the text editor first, you'll be able to see without it executing and potentially avoid any trouble that way. If you have anything that you're unsure of and you want to know if it's safe to run, you can always email us or you can ask us on the forum. So let's look at the first week. We're going to be using the Python for Everybody textbook, which you can access using this address here. On this page, on the landing page, there's this lessons button up the top left. When you click on that, it will show you the different lessons that are available. We won't be going through all of them. We'll only be doing in the course up to the end of this tuples. And in the first week, we just want you to read up to the end of chapter 6. We're not going to repeat what's in the textbook because it's already explained much better there than we could do, and it's been very well refined in this textbook. However, we're not just leaving you to read the textbook and come back later. We are going to provide any help that you need if you have any questions or need any further explanation on any of these. If you click on one of these lessons, you'll be able to see that there's some videos and there is the reference. If you click on the reference, it will take you to the book part, and in it has all the explanation and exercises that you need to do. If you scroll down, it also has a section on debugging, which will have some solutions to some common problems you may find, and it will also have a glossary. At the bottom, there's some exercises that we definitely recommend that you complete to make sure you understand everything. It may seem like a lot to do that many lessons in 1 week, but each one of these lessons is maybe 15 to 30 minutes long, and we hope that it will be entirely possible to do within the time allotted. And as I said, we'll be there to help you. You can download a PDF of the textbook and use it offline to study. However, I just wanted to note that the lessons are numbered slightly differently in the PDF book from how they appear online. Whichever you use, we want you to be finished up to the end of the loops and iterations chapter by the end of the first week. And that brings us to the first week's assignment. For the first week's assignment, we want you to write a spurious predictor. And this is just supposed to be a little bit of fun. It's not supposed to be serious. And what a spurious predictor is, it asks for a piece of information, and then based on that piece of information, it will make a deliberately spurious prediction. For example, you could ask the user for their age, and then based on their age, make some spurious prediction about their favorite TV show when they were growing up. This will require you to ask the user for some input, and then write some conditional statements based on that input, and then print the result. In this example, based on the user's age, you could make some prediction about their favorite TV show when they were growing up. So if they were over the age of 60, then you could say the Addams Family. If they're between 50 and 60, the Brady Bunch or the Transformers. To do this, I literally just looked up some of the most popular TV shows in each decade and used that. I've also put in a default value if there's some value that we haven't captured here. For example, anybody less than 40 wouldn't be included in this example, and so I've just put in a catch-all value for Sesame Street because it's been around for 50 years and probably everybody's seen it. Now, as I said, this is supposed to be spurious and not supposed to be anything scientific. When you do yours, make sure you keep it light. Don't make anything offensive. For example, you could make a prediction about tomorrow's weather if you ask the user for the temperature today, or you could ask the user for their football team and make a prediction about where they will finish on the ladder. However, note if you choose that last example, you'll have to have values for all the different football teams in whichever league you're talking about. So have a think about it, come up with something fun. It is supposed to be light. It should only be less than 20 lines of code, and it should help solidify the concepts that you've learned. Just a note about sharing your code. Any code that you post to the forum or to any of the Dropbox folders as part of the assignments will be made available to others via a Creative Commons by attribution share alike license. The exact terms of this license are available at this website. However, basically it just says that others are allowed to use this code as long as they attribute you as the original author. You can also add a header to your scripts by just adding a few lines of text at the top between 3 single quotes, and you can include in there things like your name, your website. You could put a license in there if you want to use a different license, the date, and maybe a description of what the script is supposed to do. When you write the plugins for IOLITE, they have their own specific header format that's different to this, so you won't need this here. But you can put that in your other scripts, and it's probably good practice to have some sort of header in your scripts. Of course, you can choose to keep all of your work anonymous for your assignments. And finally, let's talk about support. As I mentioned, Joe and I will be helping you all along the way. We'll be doing this primarily via the forum, because it means if one person asks a question that perhaps lots of people have, then everyone can read the answer that we reply. In addition to checking the forum regularly throughout the week, Joe and I will also be available for live online help between these times. I'll be available on Tuesday evenings in Melbourne time, and Joe will be available on Wednesday mornings Ontario time. You just need to convert that to whatever your local time zone is. And so with that, I'd like to say good luck and happy learning. I hope you enjoy the course. This is the first time we've run it, so please bear with us. I'm sure that you'll get a lot out of it. And as far as I'm aware, I've never heard of anybody regretting learning Python. And I'm sure that you will be able to take what you learn and use it to create the tools and things that you want. So, best of luck, and let us know if you need any help.